So coming up this weekend is going to be UFC Fight Night Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov taking place in Abu Dhabi in front of a crowd, and it should be a pretty stacked card. And not only that, it is a card that I genuinely am looking forward to. Before I do get into my picks for this one, I'm sure a lot of you guys probably want to hear my thoughts on UFC 304. Leon Edwards lost. Yeah, Leon Edwards lost. Did he look good? No, he just folded to the pressure of Belal Muhammad, and Belal Muhammad, to his credit, has made a lot of improvements. He did look very dominant in the wrestling, a lot better than I personally expected him to, and Leon just crumbled, man. He just backed up against the cage and didn't do anything. So yeah, very disappointed in that result. It is just another division dead at the end of the day, but it is what it is. We'll see what happens next. But someone that did have a massive win in the weekend was, of course, Jacob from We Want Picks, with, I believe, multiple thousands of dollars on Belal Muhammad. So he would have made a very nice weekend, and you can get access to all of his bets and Angelo's bets as well from We Want Picks on the WeWantPicks.com website for $10 per month. And then alongside that, you get a lot of tools for helping you make your own bets, and also an article that I write every single week. This week, it's going to be the PFL. The PFL is going to be taking place next weekend as well with their semi-finals. And to address the card overall for UFC 304, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I didn't actually pay that much attention to the whole card aside from the co-main and the main, because I've been at university since 9 a.m. in the morning, working on 2 assignments and my lab report, and it's 7 p.m. So I spent pretty much 9 hours straight at university working, and I had the UFC going on in the background. Let's get into this card here. The first one opening up the card according to Tapology is Sedriques Dumas fighting against Denis Tiuliulin. Now, I will just say it, I did pick Denis Tiuliulin the first time that this fight was booked, but then it got rescheduled. I believe it was an issue with Dumas' side, with maybe not getting a visa. I believe the original location was going to be Saudi Arabia, but now it's been rescheduled a few months later, and now Sedriques Dumas is going to have more time to prepare for Denis. Now, I did like Denis originally because it was short notice. I thought that was going to favour Denis. Denis, I know he's from Russia, but if you do follow his Instagram closely, he does live and train in Dubai, and that probably means that he's been training alongside Khamzat Chimaev for a little bit, so maybe that wrestling has improved. But for the most part, Denis is just a brawler on the feet. As much as I do love Denis, if you don't know, I am a fan of Denis because he just accepts short notice fights that nobody else does. That's kind of all he really has to offer, and Sedriques Dumas, although he's not really a fan favourite, has still kind of proven to be a decent technical striker, and he is getting better, and he can wrestle and grapple. I don't know, man. I mean, I could see a real argument for Denis winning this fight. It is a low confidence pick for me on the Dumas side, but I'm still going to go with him. I think he can just fight from range a lot better than Denis can, to be honest, and I'm going to go with Dumas to win by decision. But our boy Denis has been getting finished recently, so maybe we could see something like that happen as well. Now, Jai Herbert is going to be fighting against Rolando Bedoya. I am going to side with Jai Herbert in this matchup. Now, I will admit, he hasn't looked that great recently, but my goodness, when he does look good, he does look good. I mean, I know that's going to sound weird to say, but did he show up against Free Siam? Not really. But did he look good against Ilia Topuria before he got knocked out? Yeah, he did. He looked good against Kyle Nelson, and that win has aged very well. And then the fight against Klein was also quite competitive in the striking. Jai Herbert is a powerful striker. He is a good technical striker, and Bedoya is going to match him with that on the feet. Bedoya has been fighting at welterweight recently. I'm going to double check that this is his lightweight debut in the UFC, and yes it is, and that makes sense because he is not a big welterweight at all. He made his debut against Chaos Williams, and I believe that was a short notice replacement, and he gave Chaos Williams a very tough fight, and then he lost to Song Kanan in another striking matchup against a much bigger opponent. Now, I think that Jai Herbert's going to have that size advantage here at 155, and I think he is the more technical striker. I would almost argue that he could be the more powerful striker as well, and I think that's what it's going to come down to. I think that Jai Herbert is going to land the better strikes in this one. He is 36 years old. He has taken damage in his career. I can see an argument for Bedoya winning with his pressure and high volume, but ultimately I am still going to side with Jai Herbert to win a decision in this one here by landing the better strikes. Victoria... Mel, I can't believe I nearly butchered an easy name to say. I did. Victoria Dudakova is fighting against Sam Hughes. And I'll be honest, I butchered it because I got a little bit nervous. Victoria Dudakova, she still hasn't replied to my DM from over a year ago now at this point. So It is what it is. I think it's long lost by now if you guys have been keeping up, but it is what it is. I think that Dudakova does win, though. Now, Sam Hughes is tough. She has been proven to be tough before. She started out in the UFC on a little bit of a losing streak, but then her cardio really kind of helped her win this fight against Estela Nunes and also against Elise Reed. And that kind of is the story about Sam Hughes. She does have incredible cardio. It would be fair to assume that she has the better cardio in the matchup as well. She's a wrestler for the most part, but she can also get pressured on the feet and taken down. I think it just comes down to Dudakova being the better wrestler. I mean, I do know that she has had kind of iffy performances in the UFC. I mean, she wasn't looking amazing against Nunes on the feet before she ended up winning by the injury takedown, but Nunes is a Muay Thai striker from one championship. She beat Junyu Fry, who's a decent wrestler, but was a lot smaller than her. But I think her best performance truly is that win over Maria Silva, and that win has aged very well, as Maria Silva, I believe, has now signed to Octagon and is on a pretty good win streak there, and might have even fought for KSW as well. She's been fighting around Europe recently and has been making a lot of things happen, so that's a good win for Dudakova. She won that with the grappling. I think she can win this one here against Sam Hughes as well. It could be a tough fight for her, honestly, just because Sam Hughes is tough. Sam Hughes isn't going to give up, but I do think we're going to see Dudakova go out there and win a decision, and so do the majority of predictors. Now Guram Kutataledze fights against Jordan Vucenic, and Jordan Vucenic has stepped in now on short notice for this matchup here. He actually is typically a featherweight, although he has actually fought recently up a weight class at 155 pounds. If you do have a little look here, it must have been a catchweight event because he weighed in at about 158, and I think his opponent did as well. But prior to that, been fighting at 145 for a lot of his career. He did have that rematch against Paul Hughes, which he lost, but since then he has been getting, in my opinion, some pretty favourable matchups from Cage Warriors since then, and has really kind of earned his way back into the UFC that way, and it makes sense. He is definitely a future potential star in the making as well from England. But my goodness, getting past Guram Kutataledze probably isn't going to be an easy feat. Now, I am going to pick Guram in this one here, but Guram, did he look good against Elvis Brenner? Not really, to be honest with you. He didn't. In that fight, I know he was winning for the most part, but he was missing a lot of takedowns. He was getting lit up on the feet as well, which was very surprising, and eventually he did get KO'd. Jordan Vucenic is a very slick grappler who does have decent striking as well. I have seen a lot of people kind of wanting to pick Vucenic by submission on Twitter. I actually think that Guram is going to go out there and use that size advantage against Vucenic and win the fight with the grappling and the ground and pound, which is how he has won fights in the past. Of course, if you are unfamiliar with Guram, he does have like a massive fan base of people that are hyped up kind of just over one performance where he come in after being a regional guy that has got some good wins. He beat Gamrot, the only guy to beat Gamrot, the former champion of, I believe, KSW it was, who was 17-0 at the time, but then just kind of has been what he has been. He's been pulling out of a lot of fights. I think he's been injured. I think he does get past Vucenic though, and I do genuinely believe it's going to be that size advantage that actually is going to be the big factor here. And I do believe as well that Kutataledze will look to grapple with Vucenic, and I think he is just going to kind of control in top position and land ground and pound strikes. I do understand that only 14 people have voted, but you can actually see quite a few people are on that Vucenic submission side. So best of luck to them picking a pretty big underdog. Shamil Gaziev's fighting against Dante Almeida. I think it's a good fight for Gaziev. Now, I know that Gaziev, everyone's kind of laughing at him for his performance in the main event where he retired officially, but he quit. He gassed out and he quit. He was losing to Rosenstrike, wasn't getting the takedowns, wasn't really looking that good. And Rosenstrike ended up winning that fight by Gaziev just not wanting to fight in the next round. But, you know, like, we're laughing at him. But at the end of the day, he did still lose to a top contender in Rosenstrike, who was a very dangerous striker with very big power. Before that, he was looking good. He beat Martin Buday. Probably did a lot of people a favour after what Bedoya did to Arlovsky recently. That was just an embarrassment. And then he did beat Greg. That was all he did. I thought he had 2 wins in the UFC. Artem MMA, he's been exposed as a casual, folks. He beat Greg Velasco, and in that fight he dropped Greg Velasco in like the first 20 seconds and ended up getting the submission. I think in this one here, Gaziev's going to look to wrestle. I don't think he's going to mess around. I have always said that Gaziev's biggest problem is the fact that he's hittable on the feet. If you watch his win over Darko Stosic actually drops him in that fight, but he ends up coming back and knocking out Stosic. And once again, that's a good win, as Stosic, I believe, is signed to KSW right now and has got a couple wins there. Dante Almeida is a striker. He's kind of an odd heavyweight because he throws spinning kicks and he uses his range pretty well, but he's doing jumping push kicks and spinning back kicks, and honestly, he's just doing too much. He's just doing too much. If he kept it simple, he would look a bit better. He did come over that win over Kaue Machado recently, which is probably a similar stylistic matchup. Both guys, Gaziev and Machado, are very aggressive grapplers, but I still think we're going to see Gaziev go out there and get the takedowns. Maybe there's people fading Gaziev here. There isn't. I think in this one, we're going to see Gaziev wrestle, and hopefully he just doesn't gas out. It's only a 3-round fight. Kind of home territory, as I do believe Gaziev trains in Bahrain, which is like pretty geographically close to Dubai. So let's move up the card. Muhammad Yahya fights against Kaue Fernandes. Okay, the odds are kind of about what I expected them to be, but I am still surprised. I am picking Kaue Fernandes. I do think he beats Muhammad Yahya. I said this when he fought against Trevor Peek, and I picked Trevor Peek in that fight. I don't know if Yahya is actually UFC level. You know, he just hasn't looked amazing on the regional scene. I know he fought for UAE Warriors. He was the champion there. I believe he actually won the bout against this guy, Sahil Tahiri. But that was a war, and that was a very close competitive fight, which Tahiri had a lot of success in. And before that, he just beat a bunch of guys that were pretty good on paper, but he just didn't look impressive doing it. And then he goes out there against Trevor Peek. He gets out-wrestled by Trevor Peek, which is kind of crazy, and outstruck. Good performance for Peek. Kaue Fernandes come in. I believe he was actually not a short notice signing. I think he actually was signed to a contract and then made his debut against Diakese on a full camp, if that makes sense. But he lost that split decision to Diakese, who I believe ended up winning and then actually got cut shortly after because he was pretty boring. And now he fights for Octagon, one of my favorite promotions. But yeah, Kaue Fernandes, he's dangerous on the feet. You know, he's got a couple of head kick wins. I mean, the head kick to the kick to the body is not a head kick to the body. But this head kick win here, he was out of the clinch and he just throws up the head kick. It was a pretty brutal win. Very, very good. He's a very dynamic striker, Nova Unao guy. And I think that we are just going to see him beat Yahya on the feet. Now, Yahya is going to wrestle him. So it's just going to come down to, can Kaue Fernandes keep the fight on the feet? And I don't think that Yahya is actually as good of a wrestler as Diakese is. I think it's a good fight for Fernandes. I think the UFC are really going to have to look to someone like really at the bottom of the rankings to get Yahya an easy win in Abu Dhabi, and I just don't think, or Dubai, I don't think Fernandes is that guy for him to easily beat, I should say. I think that Fernandes is going to go out there and win and actually find the finish over Yahya, even though Trevor Peek wasn't able to do it. I think we see Fernandes, who is just a more technical striker, go out there and pull it off. Alonzo Menifield fights against Azamat Murzakanov, and it's weird because Menifield was KO'd pretty recently, only 2 months ago, and Azamat Murzakanov has been somewhat inactive recently, and especially for a guy that is a little bit older. He's 35 years old now, fought just Dustin Jacoby over a year ago. Before that, an 8-month gap, so not too much, but before that, he was a lot more active, so I'm thinking he might have potentially gotten injured or something like that. I do think he's going to beat him. I do think Azamat Murzakanov is going to win. It's kind of where I'm trying to get to. Murzakanov really, really surprised me in that fight against Dustin Jacoby. I did not expect Murzakanov to be the guy to outstrike Dustin Jacoby from range. And that says a lot, because Dustin Jacoby is a former Glory kickboxer. He actually put MMA to the side to pursue a Glory kickboxing career, and then come back into MMA, won on the Contender Series, and then got into the rankings as a UFC light heavyweight with good striking. And Murzakanov won that fight with the striking. And now he's going to fight against Alonzo Menifield, and I strongly believe that he is actually going to be the more technical striker out of the two. And we just saw Menifield get jabbed by Carlos Ulberg, and this is actually what happened. Carlos Ulberg threw a jab, and Alonzo Menifield had absolutely no idea how to deal with it, so he just ran forward and blitzed forward against a sniper on the feet, and Ulberg knocked him out. Do I think Murzakanov going to be able to knock him out in like 30 seconds? I'm going to say no to that. But I still think we're going to see Murzakanov go out there and beat up Alonzo Menifield on the feet because he is just the better striker. Now, it is worth noting that Murzakanov has actually struggled in the past against strikers that weren't super technical but did have a lot of power. And I'm going to actually look to the Tafon Unchakwi win because he had to pull that fight out of the fire, I guess, because he was down. He was losing that fight against Tafon Unchakwi. And then Leon Edwards didn't pull it out of the fire, did he? But, yeah, he won that fight as a comeback KO win against Tafon and Chukwi. And then he come back, beat Devin Clark. Decent win, I guess. That was actually the fight which Devin Clark's dad was going crazy in the background. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. But I think that Murzakanov is going to be able to beat Alonzo Menifield. And I think I only have favourites picked so far. But don't you worry, I do have underdogs on the way. Joel Alvarez is fighting against Alves Brenner, and if the odds flip, this actually could be my next underdog pick. I am going to pick Joel Alvarez, and it just comes down to one very simple thing: size. Joel Alvarez is absolutely massive for lightweight. He actually might be the biggest lightweight in the division in terms of height. I guess you could maybe make an argument for someone like Islam Makhachev being like the biggest, because although he's not 6'3", he's just gigantic with a lot of muscle mass. Alvarez is 6'3". He's obviously very tall for the weight class, and he's just big in general. I mean, maybe Jalen Turner you can make the argument for, but the point is, top 5 biggest lightweights on the UFC roster. Probably top 5 biggest lightweights in the world in MMA, to be honest with you, fighting against Alves Brenner, who I've said it before and I'll say it again. I strongly believe Alves Brenner could fight at 145 pounds. He's done it in the past in his career, and I think that he probably could make the weight kind of no problem. I know he's listed at 5'10", but this guy is not big for the weight class, man. He looked very small against Kenan Kotruski. He looked very small against Guram Kutataledze, and he didn't look out of place at all against Takugov, who was a former featherweight in that one there. He did lose to Miktubik Urubai, who is actually a former welterweight, who's now... No, Miktubik Urubai's actual natural weight class was lightweight, but he fought at 170 when he was in the LFA, and also for his short notice fight, but... That aside, Alves Brenner, I think that in this matchup, Joel Alvarez is going to need to get the fight down to the ground. Now, I do respect the fact that Alves Brenner, being a shooter box guy, is not just very good on the feet, but also very good in the grappling. I just don't know if he's going to have the size to deal with someone as big as Joel Alvarez. And I understand that having someone like Charles Oliveira as your primary training partner, who probably is also one of the biggest lightweights in the division, is going to be good for a fight like this. I think it is going to look like a featherweight versus a welterweight, man. I really do. And I know that you can't just pick based on size, but I think that's going to be a big factor when it comes to the grappling, and Joel Alvarez is going to be on top. He's going to be so heavy against Brenner. I think that we see Alvarez go out there and get the win. He also did have a pretty good comeback win over Mark Diakese where he got the sub, but before that, it was a brutal knockout loss to Arman Sarukian. Before that, he was looking good though. I think that we see him come back with another solid win over Alves Brenner. Alves Brenner is, of course, one of Charles Oliveira's minions, and I will say this right now. If Charles Oliveira is in Alves Brenner's corner, his chances of winning double. I haven't seen many of his minions lose when he's in the corner. Now we move up to Dern versus Godinez. I have seen a lot of talk about this fight. A lot of people are picking Godinez as the underdog here. I can see it. I really can. But my problem with this fight is fight IQ. And I do strongly believe that Lupita Godinez's fight IQ is what has stopped her from being a top-ranked contender, and what potentially will stop her until she can kind of sort it out. She comes into the UFC, finds a lot of success, very impressive win over Ariana Canelossi, is known and renowned for her very good wrestling. Fights Angela Hill, attempts a couple of takedowns in the first round, doesn't really get them, but kind of looks like if she sets them up a little bit better, she probably will be able to get the takedown. What does she do? Doesn't attempt another takedown for the whole fight and loses a decision and accepts a loss on the feet to Angela Hill, who is a good striker. Despite the record, she is a very good striker. And then she goes on, she wins a few fights, it is what it is. And I guess you could say, oh, she beat Tabitha Ricci, she's fighting Dern, it's the same, which is true. I think Godinez is going to come out there against Dern, and it's just going to put herself in a triangle, or something like that. I really do believe that Dern is going to lock up a submission here, just because Godinez's fight IQ just isn't good. It just isn't good, and I cannot trust someone with bad fight IQ. I guess you could almost say something similar with Dern. who decides to strike with people that can knock her out. Amanda Lemos absolutely dominated her for multiple rounds and knocked her down many times. I'm surprised there wasn't a TKO finish. She got slept badly by Andrade, knocked down multiple times. Yeah, I guess Dern's just in a CTE speedrun right now, but yeah, she is. I mean, she got knocked out by Andrade and then come back 3 months later, and that was brutal damage as well in between those two fights. And now she's back already. I think Dern still wins by submission. That was my pick coming into this video. I'm not going to change it now. The idea, I think, for Denis is just her winning on the feet, or potentially controlling on top and not getting submitted. But I just can't see Denis controlling on top and not getting submitted when I've seen fight IQ like her versus Angela Hill. Tony Ferguson fights against Michael Chiesa. How many is it in a row now? It's got to be 8 or 9. 7. It's going to be 8 in a row. When I started my YouTube channel, he was only on a 2-fight losing streak. And I picked him to beat Dariush and Chandler and Diaz and Green and Pimblett. Oh my god. I'm not picking him to beat Chiesa. This is sad. This is really sad. And it's Michael Chiesa. They're just giving him a win because if he loses, then he's going to get kicked off the analyst desk. You can't pick Tony anymore, man. You just can't. But the thing is that Tony can probably use to his advantage is actually the fact that Chiesa probably is the worst striker in the UFC right now. But it doesn't matter because he's so big and he's going to be able to out-wrestle Ferguson and probably take him down. And Ferguson's takedown defense hasn't looked that good recently. Yikes. I think Chiesa wins. He probably wins by... Dude, Bobby Green submitted Tony Ferguson. And now Chiesa's going to do it. Who did Chiesa fight recently? Holland? Yeah. I think Chiesa's going to just out-wrestle Ferguson. It's just... Marlon Vera fights against Deiveson Figueiredo. I'm going to pick Figgy. I'm going to pick Figgy, man. Yikes. Figgy looks good against Garbrandt. Now, I will give Garbrandt a lot of credit, actually, against him, because Garbrandt looked really good on the feet against Figgy, did he not? Like, Garbrandt, to start with, looked absolutely massive, but he was able to outstrike Figueiredo for a lot of that fight on UFC 300, but then eventually Figgy was able to start getting the grappling going, and as soon as he got the grappling going, he really was kind of able to expose a weakness in Garbrandt's game, which I guess maybe a lot of people weren't that familiar with, because Garbrandt has been known for very good takedown defense, and for all of his fights, to my understanding, actually taking place on the feet. But now we fight against Marlon Vera, and Vera was given a interesting title shot against Sean O'Malley. Now, at the time, it was like, okay, it's cool, let's settle the rematch while we can, while O'Malley's a champ, and you don't have to kind of risk Vera maybe fighting someone and then losing, and then it can never happen. So hindsight is 2020, and hindsight it was a bad idea, but he didn't look good against O'Malley. He had nothing for Sean O'Malley, let's be honest, and O'Malley just pieced him up for the whole fight. And then he fights against Cory Sandhagen, and a judge somehow gives him the fight. Really, Sandhagen won that fight and looked impressive using his offensive wrestling and grappling, and he beats Munoz. But I think that Figgy can go out there and beat Marlon Vera. Now, the thing about Figueiredo is I actually expected him to be a lot bigger at 135 pounds than he is, because he was massive for flyweight. I think the rumor was that he cut from 170 pounds or 160 pounds, I think is actually a lot more accurate, to 125 pounds. Like, that was how brutal his weight cut was. And I thought, man, like, you know, if he's cutting weight like that and he can go up to 135, he probably doesn't even need to put any more weight on. He's going to look fine at 135, and then he makes his 135 debut against Rob Font, and he looks small. He goes out there against Cody Garbrandt, and he looks even smaller. He looked really small against Cody Garbrandt, so I'm kind of thinking maybe size could be a real factor here, but we've seen that Figgy can hold up on the feet, and we've also seen that he's a very good grappler. The way that Marlon Vera wins is actually probably pretty good for this matchup, is that he does take the first round off. He uses that first round to make reads, and then after that, he goes out there and uses those reads that he made earlier on in the fight to end up landing big shots and winning. Did it work against O'Malley? No, he spent 4 rounds making reads. But before that, I guess the best example of it happening actually is these two fights against Rob Font. Now, in that fight against Rob Font, he gets outstruck significantly, but because he knocked down Rob Font in, I believe, 4 out of 5 rounds and just did more damage in that fight, he won the fight. Rob Font was winning every single round until he wasn't, until he got knocked down and he was on the canvas. And then the same thing about Dominic Cruz. I actually picked Dominic Cruz in that fight, so that's a bit of a tough one for me. Dominic Cruz was winning, but what was happening? We were seeing Chito Vera making reads on him, and he eventually ended up catching Dominic Cruz with probably one of the flushest, smoothest, well set up head kicks we've probably seen in a long time. It was a good one, unfortunately, but it is what it is. I think that we're going to see Figgy go out there, land more volume, and then also be a grappling threat. Now, I guess another argument could be that Vera is a very good grappler, and he is. He just is a better grappler than Cody Garbrandt is. But I think that Figgy can mix up the volume on the feet with some offensive takedowns and maybe disrupt Marlon Vera's kind of processing time that he uses. And I think he gets it done. I'm going to pick Figgy. I didn't expect only 20% of people to be picking Vera. I thought this was going to be near 50-50, but it is what it is. Marlon Vera. Yeah, only plus 135. I guess maybe people are really off him from the O'Malley fight. I don't really blame them. Shara Magomedov fights against Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. A short notice fight for both guys. Both guys accepted it on short notice. Shara Magomedov has actually been in the US recently, filming for a movie, and his manager has been telling us that he can fight in the US, but he's just going to be going back to Dubai. I know that a lot of people are saying that he can't fight in the US because of his eye. Dre Miley has one eye. He doesn't have one of his eyes, and he still fights in the US. Anyway, Sharaputin Magomedov versus Mikhail. I think it's a good matchup for Sharaputin. I really do. It's striker versus striker, and Mikhail just doesn't have the same amount of tools on the feet. And I think that's just what it comes down to, because if you really look into Mikhail's career, does he throw leg kicks? No. Does he throw body kicks? No, not really. He just boxes. He's a boxer. He does have wrestling, which we actually have seen quite a bit of recently, somewhat. But for the most part, he genuinely only has boxing, and that's it. He's a boxer, and he's managed to make a good career out of it. Looked good against Holland, actually kind of had that big moment against Kevin Holland recently. Lost to Mikhail Pereira, but Pereira just is Pereira. He's looking good, man. Knocked out Chidi Njokwani, a fight that I didn't expect to happen, and actually, you could actually draw parallels to this matchup, because Sharaputin Magomedov is a solid striker, a kickboxer that throws a lot of kicks, and so is Chidi, sorry. Yeah, and then Cody is what it is. I think Sharaputin Magomedov does win. I thought he didn't look that good in his debut against Bruno Silva, was out-wrestled, was taken down, but then he, oh god, that was a bit of a terrible performance as well. Chikoli was kind of a tough matchup for him, because he was massive for the weight class, I guess, but he didn't really do anything, did he? He ended up knocking him out. It is what it is in the third round. Mikhail is going to be a lot more willing to stand and trade with Sharaputin than Chikoli was, and that probably could be a good thing for both guys. Maybe Mikhail accepted the short notice fight because he's been wrestling recently. He's going to take Sharaputin down, which is his big disadvantage. We saw him taken down by Bruno Silva. We never see Bruno Silva take people down, ever. He's not a good grappler. I think he's got like 5 or 6 submission losses out of his 10 total losses now. I think we see Sharaputin win. I think he does beat up Mikhail on the feet. Hopefully that takedown defense has been worked on, but as long as the fight is on the feet, I think it's going to favor Sharaputin, and I think he does go out there and get it done. Mikhail Oleksiejczuk just got submitted recently. A lot of people thought that he lost his arm. Like, his arm got dislocated. It must have been fine. That's actually something to kind of think about as well. I guess you could kind of assume that Mikhail's going to wrestle here, but if he's not, I think that Sharaputin is going to look good. And I am aware that I've picked all favourites, but I've been saving the underdog for last. As soon as this fight was rumoured, and this fight was rumoured a long time ago, and I think it was actually booked a long time ago, I was going to pick Umar Nurmagomedov, and I did in 2023, in August 2023. And then we saw Cory Sandhagen beat Rob Font. Was it a good performance? Yes, because he dominated, but was it exciting? No, but the reason why it wasn't exciting was just because it was a wrestling performance for Cory Sandhagen. He out-wrestled Rob Font, and that tells me that whole training camp, he was working on his wrestling. The whole training camp, he must have been wrestling to fight against Umar. And I genuinely believe that Cory Sandhagen has increased so much into his like bag of tricks since he lost to Aljamain Sterling. No, he beat Aljo. No. He lost to Aljo. Hold on. Here we go. In 2020. That was 4 years ago. Wow. But wow. I didn't realize it was that long ago. I just had a moment. But he lost to Aljamain Sterling in what was, for him, probably a pretty embarrassing loss because it was in 90 seconds, and he was regarded as like the next big thing because he was that guy, he was throwing those interesting strikes, he was throwing spinning kicks. In fact, he got a wheeled kick in his next fight and then the flying knee against poor Frankie Edgar. But he was looking good, but he got out-grappled by Aljamain Sterling. And I think that was when he really kind of went to the well and worked on his grappling. He got out-wrestled by TJ Dillashaw in a fight he should have won, in my opinion. Pretty strongly believe that. Went to the well, worked on his wrestling. Fights against Petr Yan, one of the best fights of the year. Just was such a technical, good performance. It was brilliant. I really enjoyed watching it. And then after that, he goes out there and he finds a lot of success. And one perpendicular, I guess, I don't even think that's a word people use, is that in these wins that he's had recently, he's been mixing in wrestling. He started really mixing the wrestling with the striking against Song Yadong. He started really mixing the striking against Chito, which he should have won unanimously, and he did that against Rob Font. He fights Umar Nurmagomedov, who I strongly used to believe this, actually, and it's going to sound crazy to hear now, but in 2021, 2022, I actually believed that Umar Nurmagomedov was a better striker than a wrestler. Now, that's not true. It just isn't, let's be honest. He got dropped by Beksat Amakan, and he just kind of has been dominating with his wrestling his whole career. But I did genuinely believe that at one point. And that just tells you that Umar Nurmagomedov isn't just a wrestler. He's not a guy that can only wrestle, like Islam Makhachev, for example. What makes Islam Makhachev so dominant and so good as a champion, and in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions as well, I kind of think makes him a more skillful overall fighter than Khabib, is the fact that not only is he so good at wrestling and ground and pound and grappling, he is a very, very good striker as well. We saw that in the Volkanovski fights, both of them. The first one, where the fight was a lot more competitive on the feet than I think a lot of people were expecting, but it was more competitive on the ground than a lot of people were expecting. But in this fight here, I do think that we're going to see Cory Sandhagen kind of be very tricky, be very elusive on the feet, but also mix in the wrestling as well. Do I think that he's actually going to offensively accept wrestling against Umar Nurmagomedov? I'm going to say probably not, but he might test it out in the early rounds, and if it doesn't work, then he's just never going to go to it. But I think that it could also tell you that Cory's going to be prepared to potentially reverse positions here. And another thing as well about Umar Nurmagomedov is we have never seen him on bottom in his career. We've never seen Umar on his back. We don't know how good his stand-up is. We can assume that it's very good. It probably is. But we haven't seen it in the UFC yet. So maybe Cory Sandhagen can go out there and find some control time alongside that striking, that I think that he's going to have a threat against Umar. Umar hadn't really knocked anyone out cold on the feet. I know he's got TKO wins, but he hadn't knocked anyone out until he knocked out Raoni Barcelos, so that tells us now he does have the KO power on the feet to go alongside what in my opinion is still very solid and good technical striking. Beksat Amakan accepted that fight on short notice. Beksat Amakan's absolutely no bum whatsoever. I know his record got reduced down to 11-1. He was 17-1 when they accepted the fight, but it's because they decided that these Jepejek fights actually aren't MMA fights. But the thing about the Jepejek is if you do consider Jepejek MMA, then Beksat Amakan is actually 25-1 as a fighter. So Beksat Amakan, he's a guy to keep your eye out for 100%. But I do think that Cory Sandhagen's going to win by decision. Is that a hot take? Probably. I think a lot of people are going to go with Umar. But it just comes down to, I think that we've seen Cory Sandhagen look good against the elite of the elite for, 4 years now. 5 years now, potentially. And Umar hasn't really taken that big step up in competition. I believe he was meant to have that opportunity against Sandhagen in 2023. I thought that he had a fight booked against someone else, but I guess it was a short notice for both guys, which is kind of cool for Beksat. But yeah, I think this is a real good fight. I think it's really going to determine probably who fights O'Malley next after Merab. And I do think it's going to be Cory Sandhagen. I think he's going to be just well-rounded. I think he's going to be tricky on the feet for Umar to deal with. And I think that he can hang in the wrestling and the grappling. His pure grappling has improved. He can throw up submissions. It's not really his game. But if he needs to throw up a triangle or something to get to his feet, I don't think that Cory Sandhagen's not going to do that. So that's why I'm going to pick Cory Sandhagen in this one here. Another thing too is we haven't seen Umar go a hard 5 rounds before. Maybe he has for the PFL in the past. I think that Sedriques Kakramonov fight was 3 rounds, and maybe these fights for Fight Nights Global and those other local Russian promotions were. But recently, he has been dominating. Of course, the fight against Biksat went 3 rounds. The fight against Nate Maness went 3 rounds. But aside from the first round for Biksat, he just dominated all of those fights. So, be interesting to see how he can deal with a little bit of pressure, a 5-round atmosphere now. Hey, I've been proven wrong before by these guys. I'll probably be proven wrong again, but I do think that we are going to see Cory Sandhagen go out there and get it done. I picked him in 2023, and I'm not going to change that pick now. Let's see how it goes.